Hello world, I'm Del Hussain and this is the Wow Mind. I'm here with Ruqsana Begum, the World Muay Thai kickboxing champion and also a world medalist. The World Championships medalist, aren't you? I think you got a bronze in that, which was brilliant because there's something like 150 countries.
Yes.
And I was watching actually some of those fights yesterday, but that's not the thing. But I think what's really interesting, Rox, with yourself is the journey you've been on and the kind of way that people have found your story so captivating that I think you're getting invited all over the place to talk about this journey. So if I am to ask you a little bit to maybe tell us a little bit about that, some of the things that you've gone through.
I mean, I've been privileged to be able to share my journey and my experience and my wisdom through my book, obviously Born Fighter, through different media channels, and here I am with yourself. And it's such an honor to be able to talk about the challenges that I faced and how I overcame that, because it can support other people who are facing similar situations. Because I look back and I think if I had a role model, that would have made all the difference in my life. And at the time, I didn't really have anyone that I could really look up to, especially a sports star who was a Muslim female, from the background that I come from, which is British Bangladeshi. So I feel like I'm in a very privileged position to be able to shed light on my story and help others to overcome certain obstacles that they may face in their life.
But your story is a story, and it's a story not only, you mentioned very briefly, I have Ruqsana's book here, Born Fighter, and it's a really excellent read. And I know as I've been reading it, I couldn't put it down, and I finished it in about 3 days, which is very fast for me because I'm such a slow reader. But I think some of the things that are in here was the fact that you got to a point where you finished uni. So first of all, that's a point when that's the big thing that they're aiming for at that point. But you got married at that point, just as almost like uni, tick, get married straight away. Yeah. So how did that happen?
So I had an arranged marriage. Obviously, I studied architecture at university, and straight whilst I was doing my dissertation, my parents had introduced me to someone, and they wanted me to, pursue this kind of for my next chapter of my life. And I felt slight pressure. There was a subtle pressure there. I didn't have any objections, but I wasn't sure about it either. But due to the pressure, I had agreed to it because his father was ill. And I went ahead with it, but within 7-8 months, I became chronically ill, suffered from depression, panic attacks, just mental health in general. And because of the, treatment and the expectations that I had been encountering during this period of my, marital life. For me, I guess the sport was a savior. So for me, it gave me a second lifeline, and it enabled me to find my identity. And it was a struggle because I was caught between two identities, two cultures. I was brought up as a modern British independent woman on one side, going to university, encouraged to kind of follow my dreams and passions in life, and on the other hand, I had very strong, deep-rooted values and beliefs and cultural expectations, and it was colliding all the time. And it didn't matter where I was, people had certain expectations, whether it's my family or my friends or my in-laws or work, and I was divided into so many different aspects of myself, and I couldn't bring it all together.
You were this 22-year-old, something like
22-year-old.
22-year-old, yeah. And 22-year-old, and all of a sudden you're out of the home anyway. Because when you studied, did you study in London?
I did.
You did. So were you living at home?
I did, yes.
So you were living at home, and so you've been living at home with the rest of your brothers and sisters and like normal family.
Yeah.
Then all of a sudden, not only do you leave home, but you go into a home and you inherit another family at the age of 22. When
I start a new job.
You start a new job.
Quite a high demanding job at the time. I was trying to please everyone at the same time. And everything around me had changed. My home dynamic had changed. My family, obviously, I'm in a new family now. They don't know me. I don't know them. So it was incredibly difficult to be able to adjust within a second to be able. And
you're actually a very accommodating person. You're actually very kind, and
I consider myself to be able to adapt to different changes, especially because this is what I've learned through the sport, is that you adapt, you change, you change your strategy every time that you face an obstacle. If plan A doesn't work, you go into plan B. You don't sit there and sulk. You just get on with it.
So when someone like you, who's a fighter, and you end up in a family like this, at what point do you think, God, this isn't what I signed up for? This isn't what I want to do. This is actually making me miserable. And how did you realize? How did you feel? What were the signs?
I think there was various moments where I remember just like looking out the window, completely frozen, thinking, wow, is this what life is like to be married? And is this the rest of my life now? And I felt so trapped. And I remember my friends even giving me their opinions and saying, get that Western girl mentality out of your head. And because I was quite driven, I was quite ambitious. Yes, I had values. I had very deep-rooted, family values, core values. Yet I was someone who was very ambitious. And, I wanted to be able to bridge the gap between being modern, ambitious, progressive, as well as being someone who can be traditional, who has values, who respects their parents and, comes home by 7 p.m. Because that's how I was. I would listen to my parents. I would respect them immensely and not break any rules. And so it was a challenging time in my life.
And did you, when you were going through this, at what point did you think, I can't take this?
I was constantly trying to find ways to better myself and to please everyone. And I remember one day I woke up and I accepted that this is it. This is how my life's going to be. So I may as well embrace it, take it in my stride that my new family is going to behave this way towards me. I felt almost like a slave in the house. And then work was quite challenging because I was a new,
grad.
Yeah.
With high expectations.
Starting in a world where there's only 2 grads. There was me and my friend that got hired. So we were the only 2 people, the youngest 2 people in the whole company. So it was a massive company. So there was a lot of pressure and expectation, and I wanted to make a good impression at the same time. But I think my mental health was definitely suffering, and I couldn't be myself. I was walking on eggshells wherever I went. And I believe, I remember my mother picked it up. She used to come and visit me, and she noticed that I wasn't free in the house. Even in the household, I was constantly, am I allowed to eat this? Am I allowed to sit there? Am I allowed to go and have a shower right now? It was constant, simple things. I was overthinking it because what if someone needs me? What if the guests turn up? What if they want a cup of tea? It would be my job to be able to adhere to that. So I guess that moment where I embraced it fully, that this is my life now, and I fainted in the kitchen. One morning, I remember it was a Sunday morning, and I was so looking forward to meeting my sister later on that day. And I thought, let me help my mother-in-law in the kitchen first, get my chores done, do my duty, be a dutiful daughter. And then I can maybe have a couple hours with my sister, and that would be my treat for the whole week. And that's the day I fainted, and that was it. I felt as though God took me out of the situation. The moment I embraced it, my body, my mind, my soul just rejected it.
Really?
Yeah.
That's really fascinating. And
It was.
you ended up, after fainting, well, I mean, the situation was you were in the kitchen. Was anybody else there?
My mother-in-law was cooking, so I didn't just faint. I went into some sort of shock.
Okay.
Like my body started vibrating. I was like, my eyes was rolling back.
Right.
I didn't know what had happened to me, but they told me afterwards. Then they called an ambulance. I was taken into hospital. No one knew what was wrong with me. I was there for like 2 days, I think. And I just went numb. Since that day, I think I had like 3 months of I don't know what had happened to me. And I would suffer from constant panic attacks. I was bedbound.
And prior to that, you never had panic attacks?
Never in my life. Never in my life.
So when you get a panic attack, when you got these panic attacks, it was, I mean, what happens? Your heart's racing, palpitating?
Yeah, I would feel like I can't breathe. And often I would actually faint because I would go into a state where I couldn't control the panic attack. And I would actually, because sometimes you can have a panic attack, but you're still conscious. I would lose my consciousness. I was completely like blacked out on the floor. So I would have to be in the house. So I think approximately 3 to 6 months, I was just home with my parents. My GP, she saw me and she grabbed my hand. She was Indian, so she understood the cultural kind of, and she knew the family. And she grabbed my hand and said, "You remind me of my daughter. Can you pack your bags, go to your mum to recuperate?"
Wow. Okay.
She said that to me and she said, "Can you pick yourself back up?" I didn't know what she meant by that. Well, was there to, I just had a panic attack. I'm sure I'll be fine.
She knew.
She knew what was going on, and she knew this. She said to me, "This is the worst form of panic attacks I've ever seen in my life." And it's because you were too strong for too long. You didn't have an outlet. You didn't have anyone to talk to. Because every time I would try and speak to someone, I was shut down. So eventually I just internalized it. And those emotions manifested into panic attacks and everything else. So my body had to release it. And when it released, it all just
exploded.
Exploded. So I was
really...
no longer in control. It wasn't like, oh, okay, today I'm having a much better day. It was just a whole 3 to 6 months of, I didn't know what, I was just completely numb by it.
And when you got home, at that point, had you said to your husband's side, "I'm just going to recuperate," or was it more than that? Or you said, I'm off?
What was it? This was such a fuzzy time in my life where I think I went back to pick up some clothes because I thought I was only going for like 2 weeks and I had no clothes with me, nothing. So I think I needed some winter clothes. And no one said anything to me. No one spoke to me. And then I remember my mother-in-law handed my Quran that my parents had given me during the wedding time. And that was it. And then next thing I know, he filed for a divorce.
Okay.
And
so
I was actually relieved.
Yeah.
I was like, I couldn't face going back there.
Yeah.
And I couldn't even speak to my parents about not going back there because I tested the water with my father and he just refused to even hear it. He's just thought, no, you'll be fine. You'll get better and then you go back. That was his intentions. And then when they realized the family hadn't come to visit me or to ask about me, they realized this was deeper than what was going on the surface. They realized that I hadn't done anything wrong, but this family had other expectations and financial expectations and so forth. But I guess, this was, it was all at once, I guess.
I mean, it's really interesting that in a way that was probably the kindest thing they could have done for you in a way, because it releases you without you looking like the bad person.
Absolutely. I see it as a blessing in disguise.
Yeah.
It's really weird because that chapter of my life, that one whole year was probably such a dark period of my life, like the lowest I was. But yet it shaped the rest of my 10 year period where I've been so blessed. I was able to pursue the sport. My parents had given me a little bit more freedom. And it allowed me to find myself again, to build my identity, to discover who I am. And if I hadn't gone through that, I think I would have just gone through the motions in life. But because I had that massive breakdown, it allowed me to ask those difficult questions and really understand who I am and what I want out of life, because I went through such a high, going to university, being graduated, finding, working for one of the top companies in architecture, getting married. All of those things were like huge ticks. And my parents were so proud. I was so proud, finally earning some money on my own. So yeah, it was just incredible high. Like I was on ecstasy. And then all of a sudden, within a year, within 6 months, in fact, I was deflated, completely low, like lost my health, lost my marriage, lost my job. I didn't lose my job. I walked away from the job because I felt like I needed time for myself.
Yeah.
I didn't want to be on a medical note, still being employed.
Did you have to take like antidepressants? You did?
I did, yeah.
And how was that? What was your thinking when they said, right, you need to do this? You're at that stage where you got to take antidepressants.
I think this is when I finally came round to it and I understood what they were giving me. I was on serotonin, I was on antidepressants, I was on, muscle relaxers, sleeping tablets, all sorts.
Wow,
the whole shebang. And I just felt like I'm stronger than this. There was a moment where I remember thinking, I don't want to be on these tablets. So what I would do, I would wean myself off it by sleeping when I really craved it, because you really become addicted to it.
To sleeping.
It's an addiction. And I thought, no, I'm stronger than this. So I'd go and make myself tired in the gym, come home, and I really wanted those tablets.
Let's go to that bit there, because you said you'd make yourself tired in the gym. So, okay, so you've just been to hospital, you spent a few days there, you got your gear, you've come back home. Where does the gym come in? At what
gym
point?
Comes in a lot later than that. So I took around 3 to 6 months, I think. I was completely bedbound.
Okay. And this is when you found out you had ME?
No, ME came a lot later.
Wow, okay.
Yeah. So during that 6-month period, I was completely bedbound in my parents' home. Then when I finally got the strength to realize what was going on, I thought, no, I'm better than this. And the only thing I felt familiar with was the sport. So I took myself back to the gym. This is when I took my parents as well. The first time in my life I had plucked up the courage to bring them to the gym and reveal to them, because prior to that they didn't know I was participating in sport. I just thought it's now or never.
So when you went to this gym, this was your local gym, or did you know it was your local gym? Because you lived in Bethnal Green.
I used to live in Bethnal Green, so it was local at the time, but then we had moved to Seven Kings. So I asked my parents to drive me. Well, they were driving to East London anyway. So I said, well, can you drop me off somewhere? And I think by then they knew she needs a bit of fresh air. She needs to get out. She's been in home for like 6 months.
She needs a break, yeah.
We need to trust her more. She's been good. She followed all our instructions and did everything correctly. And then I asked them to walk in with me to the gym. And maybe they felt like, well, she has a panic attack. Let's walk in with her. So they followed me into the gym. And then I introduced them to my coach at the time.
And how long had you been going to the gym at this point?
To be fair, I was training in secret around 4 years prior to...
4 years?
Yes.
Prior to your parents'
during my university life, I was training every...
You're a good liar. Yeah.
You know what? I never told them, and they never asked me.
Right.
What I did was I would wake up extra early on a Sunday, do all the house chores, then ask my mum really politely, can I go to the gym? But they didn't know I was going to a kickboxing gym. And I think they assumed I was just going to a ladies' class.
Yeah,
and doing aerobics or something, because I used to work in Whitechapel Sports Centre as a receptionist.
That makes sense.
So they assumed, they've got a ladies' section. Maybe she's just jumping on the treadmill for a few, like 30 minutes or something. So that was their assumption, and I let them think that. I never revealed to them. I knew if I had told them I'm going to a male-dominated gym, full of testosterone-driven guys, they would not be pleased. So I allowed them to think what they wanted to think. they never confronted it. I never revealed it. I knew if I had, they would have had to say something.
Yeah.
My dad was quite smart in that sense because I think he had an inkling, because I think he saw one of my trophies in my room, and he just said to me one day, he goes, "Why do you walk like a boxer?" But he knew if he shows that he knows now, then he needs to discipline me. So he didn't. He refused to then engage in that conversation. And I continued.
And that's it's really good, because I think your dad probably had the same pressure in a way.
Yeah.
Well, the same pressure in that I think with those kind of communities of first generation immigrants who come, they just want everyone to approve of what they do.
Absolutely.
Because it's a memory of the past. And so the kid's got to live like the past in a way.
Yeah.
And he gets that you go and you do your stuff, but he just don't tell me about it.
I guess they didn't know how to navigate either, you know.
Yeah.
They were still learning on the job.
Yeah.
And, you know, like we were the first generation, so much more different with my niece. Like when I see my niece now, my dad's like, "Did you bring her a Christmas present?" I'm like, we wasn't even allowed to celebrate our birthday.
Really?
Yeah, because in case we become spoiled. I mean, they did
kind of
discreetly, but it wasn't something that we made a song or dance about it. We couldn't have a huge party or anything. We could take chocolates to school. That was about it. And maybe my mum made some pillow rice at home.
Right.
But that would be it. But we weren't allowed to say it's a birthday party or invite our friends over. That was not happening. So whereas now, my dad's like, "Oh, are we going to the restaurant? Are we booking something special for my little niece?" They're completely different, but I guess they've learned and they've progressed with the times and they've adapted as well. So I'm quite fortunate in that sense. My parents have been really open-minded, because I understand that there's so many parents still stuck in their old ways, and their children are still they've been
on the journey with you, I guess, haven't they? Or through their own eyes.
Yeah. And I guess they were able to, I think what made all the difference is the fact that I kept my principles and morals the same, and they've realized actually she knows her boundaries. You know, when I went to university, when I gave them my word, I'll be home by a certain time, I always lived up to that. If I was 5 minutes late, I would panic. Not them. I would be the one thinking, "Oh God, our parents are going to believe me? You know, the train was delayed." So they knew I had my own values and that they didn't have to worry. So I think that's what made them much more relaxed to allow me to continue to do what I was doing.
And when your dad, you mentioned your dad found a trophy under your bed.
In my room.
In your room. And what did he say when he saw it?
See, I never saw him, you know, approaching the trophy. I think he may have seen it in my room. And
didn't realise.
Well, that's when he asked me, like, "Why do you walk like?" So he was expecting a reaction, but I panicked and I ran up the stairs and I hid that trophy. And I thought, never ever again am I keeping any more trophies in my room. I just asked them not to give me any.
Really?
Which is what I do, yeah. If I had won any trophies, I would just not bring it home. I would just leave it in the gym.
So you ended up then doing local competitions. If I talk a bit about your Muay Thai, you did local competitions, and then you ended up becoming the UK champion, which is a big thing.
What I did was I dived right. So first 4 years was a hobby. I would only train once a week. I wanted to pursue as a fighter, but I was aware of the fact that I couldn't dedicate more time into the sport. And also the bruises and the injuries, that was quite scary.
That would have been interesting.
Because I was still young and quite, timid. So what I did was I trained for around 4 years, just once a week. It was more like a hobby. And then once I had the breakdown and the marriage failed, I went back to the gym. And at this point, I knew my parents had, I had the blessing, even though they didn't say yes, I knew that they hadn't said no either. So I knew I had the blessing in some sense. So I dived right into the sport, gave it my all, and within a year I got selected for Team GB. So I went from nothing. I didn't do any local competitions. I did, I think, 1 or 2 to just as a warm-up, and went right into the GB squad representing Great Britain. First year I was in Thailand. This was in 2009.
To do Muay Thai in Thailand, they're the home of Muay Thai.
It was the World Championships held in Thailand. So we got to fight in front of the king. It was just, it's incredible. The whole country is watching the whole sport. It's televised. So yeah, it was an amazing, it's like the Olympics.
And did you do, and when you're there, is it like you do rounds and then you qualify to the next round?
Yeah,
and is that how it was?
So it's a tournament. So yeah, so I got through, and then the second round, the first competition I won, and then the second competition I lost to Sweden, I believe. And then so it's just that those are my highlights over the years. So what I would do, you had the European Championships and the World Championships. I would train the whole year leading up to those competitions. In between, I did do 1 or 2 professional fights. So I became British champion in 2010. So that year I couldn't go to the World Championships because it was set at the same time.
Right.
So once I had attained the British Championships, British professional title, I realised, well, if I can achieve this, what's stopping me from becoming European champion and then a world? I was just so kind of like eager to see what I could do. There was nothing holding me back now because my parents had approved. And at that moment, I was diagnosed with ME. So when I came back from Thailand, I was competing for the British title.
And how did you know what was the thing? What was, because you would have been really fit, wouldn't you? You would have been really healthy.
Fit. I was, I could train 6 times a week, twice a day, same in Thailand. I came back and all of a sudden my body was depleted, and it didn't matter how much rest I took. I was constantly on a minus. I was struggling to climb up the stairs, doing basic things. You don't need to be an athlete to climb stairs or just, walk down the road to the local shop. So those were the little things I was struggling with. I would have a cold sweat even before walking into the gym, and my coach noticed. He said to me, because you need to get yourself tested. I went to the GP several times. They said it's quite normal for someone like yourself to be tired. I'm like, I'm not tired. This is more than tired. And eventually they sent me to a specialist who then diagnosed me with ME and said, yes, you have all the classic symptoms. And the best would advise you is to just go for long walks. You can't train, you can't do anything. Literally putting me in a wheelchair. That he even said to me, you may even end up in a wheelchair. And I refused to believe that. And I thought, okay, how do I train around it? And to be fair, the first couple of years was a struggle. I would train and I'd come home, I'm in bed for the whole day.
And how much after your divorce was this?
This was like a year after. So it could
be lingered.
I think it could all be connected because I went through such an intense period of my life. Mentally, physically, emotionally. It was just, there was so much going on. And then going back to the gym.
And then when you find that salvation, that you're going to the gym, you're getting fit, then you're having some success.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden they tell you, you have ME and you might actually even be in a wheelchair.
Yeah.
What does that do to you? What was your thinking?
Devastating. It was devastating. And I could feel myself, like if I had a good training session, I'd come home and I'm in bed for like the whole week. My whole body would suffer. Like I felt like I was being beaten up. And that's the kind of pain I would feel even when I'm lying down on the bed. It was just pure exhaustion. But I would train. I would train for like an hour, and then the whole week I would suffer from that one training session. Eventually I realized I needed to figure out a better plan, how to continue to train. And I would strategize, so make it less about fitness, more about understanding concepts that I can drill and not exert myself too much. And that became my strategy, especially for the world title, for my European, I just gave it my all. And I thought, you know what? After the fight, if I collapse, I collapse. But before, I'm just going to underplay it now. So everything was all about undertraining and mental visualization and understanding concepts. For me, that's what I figured out that took me 10 years to get there though. Wow. This is what people forget, is that it wasn't an overnight thing that I discovered. It took me 10 years how to manage my ME. to get the peak performance that I want as an athlete. Everyone else told me it's impossible. It's impossible for someone with your condition to even do a training session such as what we do in our gym. And I thought, okay, well, I need to now figure out how to work around it. I couldn't last a training session. They were right. So I had to then work with my coach on a one-to-one basis where if I didn't feel well, he could take a break with me. And there was loads of adjustments. If I was in a good day, we could push it a little bit more. Everything was about adapting.
Well, that's extraordinary because you've gone from this position where they're saying you're going to be in a wheelchair to talking to yourself over 10 years, massively doing huge amounts of work on your mindset, I would imagine, to convince yourself, to talk yourself mentally into it.
Yeah, and then, not giving up, pursue my dream, pursue my passion.
Then becoming a world champion.
Yeah, and I used to work part-time in a school as well, and that used to be really challenging for me because 7-8 hours standing in a day was exhausting. But I needed to finance my training, so I'd work part-time. But I remember those 2 days, Wednesdays and Fridays, I used to work, and it was good because I had a day in between rest. I would be more exhausted doing those 2 days of just standing up as a science technician than training for 2-3 hours, because the accumulation of just being upright for me was really exhausting.
Yeah, I can understand that. I watched a fight. I think it was with. Let's see if I can remember this lady's name.
Was it the Swedish opponent?
I think so, Susanna Sal.
Yeah, that was my title.
That was brutal, and
horrible.
Well, she very early on in the fight, I think she kicked her leg up, and you grabbed it.
Yeah,
and it was brilliant. You commanded it.
Yeah,
and
that day I was ill. I was struck down with, prior to that fight, a week before, I had an episode of ME, and I was in bed for the whole week. And I remember I had like interviews with Sky Sports and, different media outlets, and I couldn't go. And no one believed me. My work didn't believe me that I was ill. No one believed me. I was like, you're insane. No one trains a week before a big tournament. This is your recovery time. And in fact, I was in bed, so I couldn't even do any shadow box. And then on the day of the fight, my coach knew, he said, take a cab. We'll let the medics pull you out. Gosh. So the pressure's not on us. And I thought, okay, good idea. Got there. I was sweating. The promoter saw me and he's like, all right, let's make sure you're last so you get a couple of hours recovery now. So they did my medical ringside, which has never been done. They normally do it in the back with everyone else. That day, they tried to give me as much recovery because I'm the top bill of the night.
Yeah.
So they don't want to lose out on the ticket sales and everything else and disappointing fans. So they let me get, wipe my sweat, sat down. They did the medical. I passed. And then my coach like, okay, now we've got a problem. What do we do now? And I said to him, you know what? Just put me in for 2 minutes. That first round, maybe I just knock her out. And that'll be enough. We could all go home. So I thought, I've got enough energy to last 2 minutes. Right. 2 minutes. And we didn't last a warm-up in the back. So he said, all right, just go in 2 minutes. If I just feel uncomfortable with anything, I'm pulling it. I said, okay, fine. We made a deal. So I knew I was in safe hands. So I walked in. That's why you see me all energetic in that first round.
Yeah, you kicked ass.
And then I was depleted. And then I remember my coach like slapping me saying, this is what a world title feels like. Wake up. Because I was I knew I won the first round. I thought, okay, shit, let me just win the second one. Third round, I was like, oh my God, I'm dying now. I'm completely gone. My body had nothing in me. And then there's moments where I could see her coming towards me, but I didn't even have the energy to just sidestep. So I let her hit me. And then I thought, okay, last round coming up, let me dig deep and carry on.
Yeah, you did.
And that's what I did, yeah.
Yeah, you did. And it's really noticeable, actually, because first, second, third rounds, first round, you're
I was winning comfortably.
You're like a bull, and second round as well.
And strategy-wise too, I was winning. Yeah. And then when my energy depleted, it didn't matter
Yeah, the fourth
Nothing.
round, you were on empty. Yeah,
I was like that. I was leaning against her.
yeah. And then you came back in the fifth, and that was really good. So no, that was fantastic, and it was enjoyable to watch actually. But I did, I was on the. And it's bizarre actually when you see a boxing Muay Thai match in this case. And I knew the result, but I was watching it as though I didn't know the result, and you kind of living in the moment, saying, "Rocks, duck," And it's fantastic. So that was really great. But you took that, you won the world championship. Then all of a sudden, this kind of thing that you did for kind of like rejuvenating your confidence and your self-esteem and your belief about yourself that you're worthy of something. You're now the world champion at it. So what happened then at that point? What did it do for your self-esteem?
I tell you, and I remember having this conversation with my coach. I said, if I can do that in my worst day, and go and win a world title, being that unwell, imagine what I could do in my good day. That's the first thing that went through my mind. And I said that to my coach, and he thought, oh shit, not again.